Hey, it's Mark Bergin from the Browns Nation Station. The listeners of the Browns Nation Station can show their Browns Nation pride by going to brownsnationswag.com. The site has all the latest and best fan gear to represent your team as the Browns continue on into the AFC playoffs. Again, that's brownsnationswag.com. And if you're listening to the Browns Nation Station on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss another episode. All right, cue the music. It's time to start the show. Welcome to the Browns Nation Station. I'm your host, Mark Bergin, joined tonight by fellow BrownsNation.com writers Pat Opperman and Wendi Oliveros. We are recording this after the Browns playoff win, a 48-37 victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Pat, I'm going to start with you. It's a changing of the guard in the AFC North, but I just wanted to get both of your first takeaways from tonight's victory.
Just a big night for Cleveland. I'm just so happy for everybody. I can imagine what downtown is like right now. Cleveland just took it to them. I think the key to this game, there were so many big moments, but the bottom line is, in a very un-Browns-like fashion, they took advantage of every break they got. They scored touchdowns after turnovers. The gamble that Tomlin took on the punt, they scored a touchdown right away after that. They didn't waste any opportunities. Parkey even hit the field goals at the end. That's how big a night it was. Just amazing. If they can start finding – this is the type of game that is just going to keep them going next year and motivate them even further. Right? It's just going to be fantastic. But I'm just so happy for the people of Cleveland. I think this is just a phenomenal night for everybody.
Wendi, hop in here.
Unbelievable. Everybody has COVID. Everybody's at home. There's so much doom and gloom, and they came out and they looked sharper than the Steelers from the first snap. That was crazy. I'm sure we'll get into it, but I don't understand what was going on with the Steelers. They couldn't snap the ball. It was a recurring theme, and it showed up big in the beginning, but awesome, clean game, took advantage of turnovers. You can't get much better.
Yeah, we're going to get into it. I want to put into context what tonight's victory means. So tonight's the Browns' first playoff win since January 1st, 1995, in a win over the Patriots. I wasn't even 2 years old at that point in my life. Now, this was also the first win for the Browns at Heinz Field since October 5th, 2003. So the last 17 games played at Heinz Field, the Browns had lost. And then this is also the Browns' first playoff road win since December the 4th, 1969. That was a victory over the Dallas Cowboys. And so the Browns able to get it done on the road tonight, despite the fact that COVID's impact on this team from coaches and players. You're without head coach Kevin Stefanski, who I think should win NFL head coach of the year. You're without your Pro Bowl left guard, Joel Bitonio. Right tackle Jack Conklin goes out tonight's game. Denzel Ward isn't playing, and the Browns find a way to win in tonight's game with all of the cards stacked against them, against their bitter AFC North foe in a game. You can now call this a rivalry because from the Steelers' standpoint, they hadn't seen the Browns as a rival because they hadn't played in the playoffs in 18 years. And you can really see a changing of the guard in this division, considering the young quarterback talent in this division with Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, who also got a playoff victory today. And when Joe Burrow comes back for the Bengals, Father Time catches everyone, but Big Ben in his 17th season, he looked like he might be at the end of the line for the Steelers. He's under contract for one more year. But I thought that this game was evident today that there is a changing of the guard in the AFC North. And it was really Baker Mayfield, the way he played, no turnovers. And I think that was really the key in tonight's game is the turnover discrepancy. You saw what that did for the Browns in tonight's victory.
Absolutely. Baker played a heck of a game for 3 quarters. Okay. I think that he was making great decisions. He was taking advantage of what he had in the first half and the fourth quarter. He was zipping passes in there. He had the little Baker bounce going. There was a little bit of swing in the third quarter. I got a little nervous. I actually messaged you guys. He started throwing the ball high, started throwing the high, hard ones instead of into the guts. And, we had a couple of 3 and outs because of that. Even the pass when Donovan Peoples-Jones fell down, that didn't look very catchable. And I was like, oh my God, the bad Baker's going to come out for the second half. It's going to be terrible. I looked up the Titans score, when we were winning by a lot, 35-7 at the half or something, and almost lost that game. And I was like, this is going to be a long second half. I warned my wife, it's going to be bad language coming out of here, hide the children. And but then he came out. He came out on the next drive after that when Pittsburgh came up, and boom, it was like the Baker of the first half came back. It's almost like he just took a break and came back, started zipping the passes in again. Good decisions. He wasn't panicking. There was several times when the pocket was collapsing, and you saw him actually put his hand on the back of his guard or tackle, whoever was in front of him, and waited to see which direction to go, and he didn't just run forward and get tackled for a loss. And I did that several times during the game, and that was something new I hadn't noticed before. But every time he escaped and came out to live another day. No sacks, nothing. It was great.
It was true that when the Steelers started to blitz more, there was a change, at least at first, until he kind of adjusted again. It just seemed like everything got a little out of sync temporarily. And I thought, oh, please, no, please let this be a short-term thing. But somehow, he pulled it together. And for the people that criticize him, which is not me, but those that do always say, oh, he's going to turn into good Baker, bad Baker. I think he really showed that he's grown this year and took the lumps and kind of just kept going. Because there was a time where you thought, oh, the Steelers might catch him, but kept it under control. Did not throw an interception. Close, very close, I thought, on some, but did not.
The two plays that stuck out to Mayfield to me at the end of the second quarter, right before the start of the half, Steelers score a touchdown to cut the deficit 28-7. And there was a 3rd and 6 conversion where Mayfield scrambles for the first down on a 3rd and 6, which extended the drive. And he held the ball with two hands as he got knocked out of bounds by the Steelers defenders, led to the Austin Hooper touchdown to put the Browns up 35-7. The Steelers come back and get a field goal to make it 35-10 at halftime. But then in the second half, the second play that stuck out to me is Mayfield took advantage of a matchup that he had in the slot. He found Jarvis Landry over the middle, matched up against Steelers linebacker Robert Spillane. Now, Spillane filling in for an injured Devin Bush, who went down way earlier in this season. But you're talking about Landry, who's a 5-time Pro Bowl receiver, lined up against a linebacker who's filling in because of injury from an injury standpoint. And whenever you've got a linebacker on a Pro Bowl receiver, that's an advantage you have to take advantage of. And so those two plays that Mayfield took advantage of were, I thought, two really key plays to the victory tonight for the Browns.
Yeah, there were several plays where I thought he made great decisions. I can't tell you how many times he was back there, and I thought, okay, there's nothing there. There's just nobody open. And he threw the ball, and I'm like, oh, my God, where's he throwing it? And there was one guy in the middle of somewhere, usually Hooper or Landry or somebody, and he kept hitting them over and over again. And I was shocked. It was just really very good vision from him and very good decision-making. And that play you're talking about, that 3rd and 6 conversion, I don't know if you noticed, but he was holding the ball with two hands, but at the last second, he raised it up to his chest a little bit higher than where he had it. If he didn't do that, he might not have got the first down. He got that first down by about the width of the ball. If he held that down in his stomach a little bit lower or curled up and tried to take the hit, instead he extended out his, not far, but picked the ball up here and was able to get the ball over the first down marker, and got that important first down at that point. That was a very, very nondescript yet very important play for the Browns.
I want to make sure we mention and credit the Browns offensive line tonight. Jack Conklin goes down with a hamstring injury, and hopefully he's back next week for the game against the Chiefs. The Browns will need their alt-pro right tackle, but then Michael Dunn filling in for Joel Bitonio at the left guard position. And up front, that was one of the matchups I had concern about, considering that Cameron Hayward, the Steelers defensive tackle, a second-team All-Pro player in his own right, rested in Week 17. And then Stephon Tuitt for the Steelers has 11 sacks on the season. And the Browns did not give up a sack against the Steelers tonight, a Steelers team that led the league in sacks during the regular season, and a Steelers team that had 70 consecutive regular season games registering a sack. And the Steelers in their last 2 playoff games have not registered a sack. And so I cannot credit the Browns offensive line and their coaching staff for preparing for the onslaught that the Steelers front seven brings.
They were prepared, and I don't know. I was trying to figure it out. Is it because the Steelers rested and they were rusty? Is it because they were thinking, oh, we're not seeing everybody, or it's still the Browns? I couldn't figure it out, but from the opening, they were not in sync, or I don't know. It was strange. And they started to pull it together during the game, but it was never like the Steelers that I'm expecting. And Tomlin too, but I'm sure we're going to talk about that too. There was decisions I was confused.
Wendi, I think that's a good point. I saw a stat from a reporter on Twitter, and I'll read this to you right now. So in week 17, when Big Ben rested, it was the 5th time that he had took week 17 off before the playoffs. And so coming into today, when he had rested in week 17, he had thrown 13 touchdown passes and 13 interceptions. He has not won a Super Bowl when he sat in week 17. When he played in week 17, 17 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions, and 2 Super Bowl wins. And so way earlier on in Big Ben's career, but you could argue that sitting in week 17 might have cost the Steelers, especially considering if the Steelers had played all of their players in week 17, maybe they would have knocked the Browns out of the playoffs. They get the rematch the following week in tonight's game. I don't know. That might be a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking, but I hear what you're saying. Wendi, let's get in, or Pat, if you wanted to hop in, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, that's been an age-old argument. As long as I've been watching football, which is much longer than you and Wendi, I'm guessing, they've always debated that. Do you rest your starters or you don't rest your starters? Do you let them go for a half just to keep them kind of fine-tuned and then take them out, or what do you do? And there's examples on both ends, but I know over the years I've always said that the teams that played their starters in week 17 always seem to have an edge over the other players, especially if you have a bye week in between. I can never understand why you rested players when you had a bye week on top of that. You just were begging them to come out stale. But I was joking with my wife during the game that Cleveland couldn't practice most of the week again because of COVID. They only had, I think, 2 practices. And Pittsburgh allegedly was practicing all week and a big advantage. I said, well, there you go. Pittsburgh's tired. They've been practicing all week, and, now they're dragging their butts, and we're nice and refreshed. Myles Garrett actually was on some show on Saturday, and he was telling the reporter that he was flying around the field on the Saturday's practice, and that he felt better than he had before. And he said he alluded that the whole team was just really raring to go. And I just took that as validation of my prediction that Browns are going to come out and kick some butt. But I'd like to point out at this point in time that only 2 of the people on this show today predicted that the Browns would win today. That's just what I meant. All of Browns Nation.
I'll be honest with you, Pat. I thought it was a combination of all of the Browns players that were out in tonight's game, but then a lot of the Steelers players that didn't play in week 17 that were coming back in tonight's game. And what a dominant first quarter for the Browns, starting out 28-0. And what might have been the most dominant quarter in Cleveland Browns history, and perhaps the worst quarter in Pittsburgh Steelers history. I thought that was huge. Again, you talk about rust in not playing in week 17. Marquise Pouncey, a guy who's been to multiple Pro Bowls, a guy who's been a multi-time all-pro player at the center position. He hadn't played in week 17. First snap of the game, there was nothing Big Ben could do because the snap was way over his head. Myles Garrett causes some disruption, knocks the ball into the end zone, and Carl Joseph scores to put the Browns up 7-0. On the very first play of the game. So it's just like you couldn't have asked for a better start for the Browns in the sense that they get a defensive touchdown from the very start to start what was an onslaught in the first quarter.
I was hoping the TV announcer would find the stat of how long it's been since Pouncey, ruined a snap like that. The look on his face his own face was total bewilderment. Like he had no idea what happened. The ball just took off. But it was a great break, and he had a few more high snaps after that too, and the one low snap where Connor was going to make the run for the first down to keep the drive going later in the game. But yeah, he had a really bad night, Pouncey. I don't know what was going on. They got no sacks, but there was disruption. Ben was on his heels a few times during the game, including that first interception. He threw it off his back foot, just lobbed it up there. There was another play before that. He also threw it off his back foot. That one worked out better for him. He got the first down. But right from the get-go, even though they didn't get the sack, they got quite a few hits. They had him on his heels. And the entire line of Pittsburgh just seemed like they were surprised by the tenaciousness of the Cleveland line. And it was just the opposite for Cleveland. Of course, we already mentioned our line. I mean, who's this guy, Heinz, that came in when Dunn got hurt? I don't even know the guy's first name. I feel terrible. I want to give him credit. Mrs. Heinz, I'm sorry, but I don't know your husband's first name, but he did great tonight.
Well, that goes to show you, Pat, the importance that Chris Hubbard had as the team's swing tackle and a guy who would fill in at the guard position when the Browns had injuries. He's out with the season-ending injury, and so it's like they're getting guys off the scrap heap, but then they're protecting Baker Mayfield against one of the best front sevens in the league. Again, this Steelers team came in leading the league in sacks. So I came in and I was just like, honestly, I'm like, it's going to be a tall ask to ask Michael Dunn, who's a young player, to have to either block Stephon Tuitt or Cam Hayward coming into this one, and the Browns didn't miss a beat.
I couldn't believe it. The run game slowed down. They tried to run off tackle a couple of times after that, and for no gain. But when Baker passed, nobody got close to him. I expected them to run right through this guy, whoever he was. He was just signed apparently as a free agent, recently, and nobody was sure if he ever practiced with the Browns or not. And here he was, and Baker is just back there. He had all the time in the world to make his decision, and everything was great. Just an amazing feat by the entire offensive line, including the regular guys who had to kind of edge over here or there to help them.
I want to give a shout out as well to J.C. Tretter on Kareem Hunt's second touchdown of the game, which eventually put the Browns up 28-0 after the extra point. J.C. Tretter pulling as the center on the play. Watch the replay. He absolutely crushes a Steelers defender en route to Hunt's touchdown. And I just cannot say enough about how this offensive line played tonight, especially considering that Bill Callahan, their offensive line coach, was one of the guys who was also out for the Browns this week. But with the shorthanded week, they hadn't practiced for most of the week. It was just, again, I was fully expecting to come into tonight's podcast saying, the Browns gave the Steelers their best chance and they had everything stacked against them. And they came out and they didn't make excuses and they got it done on the road.
And
ahead,
TJ Watt wasn't really a factor either. I was expecting more from him, and I kept waiting for that to happen with trepidation, and it never did. So they did their homework. They had everybody covered. It was incredible.
Wendi, I think that's a great point too, because when Conklin goes out, you've got all pro against all pro, right? But when Kendall Lamb, as the team's backup offensive tackle, comes into the game, how much can you really expect matching up across from a guy who might win Defensive Player of the Year?
That's right. Yeah, he probably will, but he didn't show it tonight.
I want to get to the decision, and this would be my bad call for the game. Mike Tomlin's decision to punt at the very start of the fourth quarter. And so let me break down the scenario. The Steelers were down 35-23 at this point in the game. The ball's at the Steelers' 39-yard line on a 4th and 1. And everyone on Twitter was screaming, how does Tomlin not go for it there? Maybe he figures he could punt the ball and maybe try to create a turnover. That never came in tonight's game. But at that point in the game, you're down 2 scores. If you've got 1 quarter of play left, perhaps you have maybe 3 possessions left from a Steelers standpoint. I thought the decision to punt there, and if you can't execute on a 4th and 1, either with a quick running play or some sort of quick passing play to convert, at that point in time, I had pretty good confidence in the Browns winning. But I was just curious about both of your thoughts on that decision for the Steelers to punt.
Well, I'll go first. Yeah, I was shocked, and it was like an evolving thought process that I was going through. At first, they had the end of the quarter, so he had time to think about whatever he was going to do. Puts out the punt team. They're going through all this motion, and Guys are going off the line, back to the line. Snell was in that backfield. So Snell, was there as a threat to run. And then okay, well, they're going to run it down. Obviously, they're going to try to draw us off sides. And I thought they almost did. And then I said, okay, well, they're going to call the timeout and bring Ben back out. Never happened. They took the penalty instead. So now it's 4th and 6. Oh my God, they're really going to punt. Shocked the daylights out of me, mainly because of the drive before that. Ben could not be stopped. The Browns slowed the Steelers down, but they converted a very important 3rd down, and they converted a even more important 4th down, of course. And we could slow them down, but we couldn't stop them all day. Why would you not go for it on 4th down from there? I mean, even if you failed, your defense was doing okay. Baker was struggling at that point. Now he just came off 2 series in a row, 2, 3. One was 3 and out. I don't know what he was thinking, other than he thought the punter would bury the ball, and he came close to doing that. Ball took a nice hop, but not nice enough. It just barely crossed the line, and we got the touchback. And when that happened, I actually said, okay, this is it. Baker's got to take a nice, few minutes off the clock, and it worked out beautifully. It ended up killing the Steelers completely. Took their momentum away, put the momentum back on the Cleveland Browns side, and Tomlin's going to have to explain that probably all year.
I was so confused because you're right, Pat. They had so much momentum at that point. It felt like if the game was going to turn, there it was. And it was 4th and 1. And I kept thinking, oh, it's going to be a trick play. It's got to be. This has got to be set up for a trick. And I expected that. And then I thought, why is this taking so long? What is going on? And then I was just shocked that it became 4th and 6 and they punted. I couldn't ever figure out what that was. And that's going to be like Pete Carroll in the Super Bowl. It's going to be like that decision. Like, that's always going to go down as, what were you thinking?
And that was a theme we saw all weekend. If you watched the Ravens and Titans game earlier today, Titans head coach Mike Vrabel opted to punt in a similar situation. The Titans were at the Ravens 40, and they were down 17-13 with 10:06 left in the 4th quarter. So a very similar situation. And you saw that the Titans opted to punt, Steelers opted to punt, and both of those teams lost as a result of it. And if you don't want to put Big Ben under center in the sense that him taking a snap for a QB sneak, that's a situation where you saw last week in the Week 17 game when Mason Rudolph came in, you saw the Steelers use their 3rd string quarterback, Josh Dobbs, as a gadget quarterback or as like a wildcat quarterback. I thought that was a situation there where you need 1 yard to convert. If you can't get 1 yard, in my opinion, you don't deserve to win the game. And so as soon as Tomlin made the decision to put the punt team out there, try to draw the Browns off sides, they take the delay of game penalty, I was just like, what is he doing, Pat? And especially, I think you bring up a great point here. He had the 3rd quarter going into the 4th quarter to mull it over, and he had the time to make a decision. And I don't think that it was the correct one.
That's so funny too, because I think we're so used to, over the last few years, analytics. All the young analytic coaches would probably go for that, right? They're telling you that field goal from there is not worth it. Go for it on 4th down. It's the punt is likely to be touched back. It's only a 20-yard, 10-yard gain, and twice this weekend we saw coaches that went against the analytics and decided to punt. Now I do think in Tomlin's defense, he did earlier. He did the same thing. He punted the ball from pretty close in, and I think both times he just really had he was envisioning. Especially at that point, since Mayfield was coming off 2 bad series, he was envisioning that pick 6. There's no doubt in my mind.
I just think it's fun that we're not talking about Alex Van Pelt's bad play calling. We're talking about decision-making on Mike Tomlin, because I was concerned that there was going to be Alex Van Pelt issues, and I thought he called a pretty good game. And maybe we're going to get into Tomlin and the 2-point conversions and the extra points, because I was a little confused what the plan was there too. But I'm just so glad the Browns didn't make any of these errors, and we're talking about the Steelers.
Wendi, that's a great Wendi, I saw on Twitter a little bit during the game that Van Pelt, who came over from the Green Bay Packers, there was a reason why Aaron Rodgers didn't want to see him go in Green Bay. And speaking of the 2-point conversions, credit the Browns defense for being able to shut things down. It's clear that even from the 2-yard line that the Steelers weren't going to try to run it in by handing the ball off to one of their running backs, whether it be James Conner or Benny Snell, what have you. And one of the first 2-point conversions, a thing I noticed is they lined Juju Smith-Schuster up in the slot, tried to get a quick slant pass to him, and the Browns shut that down. Big Ben has to go through his progression, and he has an incomplete pass. So I credit the Browns for making it difficult for the Steelers to convert a 2-point conversion, especially if you want to talk about how the Steelers were starting to get the momentum back at some points in this game.
Yeah, it may have been in Tomlin's mind also, the failed 2-point conversions when he was thinking about the 4th and 1. I don't know. But I'm laughing. Wendi was saying about the play calling in Van Pelt. I had pretty good faith in Van Pelt. And I think that maybe in the offseason, then when the euphoria has died down, this will raise the debate again about who should be calling the plays for the Browns. I thought today's game plan was a little bit more daring and a little bit less predictable and a little bit more impressive than it has been in some times. He kept going. He went back to the pass when I'm just sure we would have run Chubb 3 times if Kevin was there. But so yeah, again, we'll save that controversy for a week when we're not feeling quite as happy. but yeah, I thought that opened the discussion up for who's going to call the plays next year or even next week.
I know it's a 1-game sample size, but it's hard to argue putting up 48 points against this defense. And that was another thing I saw on Twitter where it's they call it the Ewing theory, where back in the day, the New York Knicks were actually a better team playing without Patrick Ewing. The Browns a better team without Kevin Stefanski. I think that's a little far-fetched, but in terms of the play calling, Pat, you might be onto something there, just considering the fact that the Browns put up 48 points against a defense that's one of the NFL's best.
That might be true, but remember how many defensive points those were too. So he was at a decided advantage from the first snap of the game. So I don't know. He did a good job, but I'm not sold on indefinitely.
Well, the total points, you're right, Wendi. That a lot of them were gimmies to say the least. But I was more impressed with the 4th quarter play calling. That's where I thought it was. That's where I saw the difference between him and Kevin Stefanski. Too many times this year. And going back to the Tennessee game, I was looking at the score and how that happened. We were outscored 28-3 in the second half and only won by 6 points. And we had some lucky breaks in that game to hold on. But yeah, that's where I noticed the difference. In the first quarter, I mean, anybody, that was just, it was impressive. We got a touchdown every time. There were no field goals. It was all touchdowns on every turnover. And that was fantastic. So I give him credit for that too. But it was really the second half when I noticed it, the 4th quarter when we were protecting the lead, but we had to score more points. And I think the scoring more points was emphasized more so than the protecting the lead. And I think it's in reverse if you go with Kevin Stefanski.
Absolutely. I think that was evident when Nick Chubb took that pass 40 yards to the house, which really put the game away, puts the Browns up 42-23. And at that point, it's just like, let's just run the clock out because Wendi, you mentioned this in our Slack group chat for the Browns Nation station. If you take tonight's victory, and then if Ohio State upsets Alabama on Monday night in the national title game, people in Ohio aren't going to be going to work this upcoming week just because they're going to be in celebration.
And they deserve it. They deserve it. And I'm going to have to bring this up. Cody Parkey was on point. He looked good. Now, granted, they were always in the lead, but I don't know. He looked different than he has the past few weeks. Maybe he's confident again. I don't know. I hope so.
He must have had a better pregame than he did last week. Last week, he was like, even he recognized he had a bad pregame. They were showing pictures of him beforehand during practice, shoulders slumped, head down, like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to play today. And today he came out, I mean, dead center, every kick, dead center, right down the middle, splitting the uprights. I kept looking. I thought maybe somebody put a third goalpost down the middle somewhere for him to aim at. I wasn't sure what happened. But yeah, he was automatic, Mr. Automatic in the playoffs. We'll see if that continues next week too.
Cody Parkey, 2 of 2 of field goals. Yeah, as long as 37 yards, and then he was 6 of 6 on extra points tonight. And so credit the Browns coaching staff for not putting him in a position to have to make a 50-plus yarder. He has not attempted a field goal of 50 yards or beyond this season, but the last 2 weeks, the Browns haven't put too much pressure on him in the sense that make sure he gets his confidence back, because going into that week 17 game, he had 3 consecutive games where he had missed an extra point, but that's not an issue at all tonight. But I look at that from, if you want to talk about other teams in the division, Justin Tucker's the most accurate kicker in NFL history, and the Steelers kicker, Chris Boswell, is 4th, at least during the regular season. And so I'm looking at that. There's like, oh man, if it comes down to a late game field goal, I would normally trust Chris Boswell a heck of a lot more than Cody Parkey, but that doesn't even matter in tonight's game.
All right.
As we start to wrap up here on the Browns Nation station, Cleveland will head to Arrowhead Stadium to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. The line's already out for this game, so the Chiefs are an 8-point favorite at home. The over-under set at 54.5, and then the other AFC matchup will be the Ravens taking on the Buffalo Bills. And so I just want to say this in my final thoughts. I've had so much fun watching football the last 2 days. I think that the NFL should make it permanent. Give us back-to-back days of triple headers in the wild card round. And that was capped off by tonight's victory that the Browns had over the Pittsburgh Steelers.
It was I think it's a great setup too. And I will say one more thing that I think could help the Browns. The fact that there's no fans and they're the traveling team is a good thing for them, because I've been to Kansas City to a game, and I don't know what their situation is and how many fans will be allowed, but a quiet stadium helps the traveling team.
Absolutely. And, it's telling this year, I believe the visiting teams actually finished over 500 in the regular season. It's a very strange phenomenon, and really the home field advantage was just taken away completely. Also, we had more points scored than ever. And, so you wonder if it's, no distractions. People aren't jumping up behind the goalpost. Maybe the quarterbacks can simply hear the wide receiver yelling, "Throw it here, I'm open," where they normally can't. Who knows what the deal is. But even with fans in the stands, the last 3 years, 8 out of the 12 visiting wildcard teams won. And all 8 of them were underdogs. So I actually said this week going into this game, 3 out of the 5 had won. So if they were going to keep up that 67%, the Browns had to win tonight, and they did. So now for 4 years, 2/3 of the visiting teams have won. As most of them as underdogs. I think a couple of them were favored this year. But yeah, my wife wasn't so thrilled with the triple header back-to-back days. But yeah, I'll admit I had a nice weekend. It was very fun.
I'm not going to lie to both of you. I think that the line will continue to move in the Chiefs' favor, even despite the Browns' victory tonight. And I think that will be almost in the favor of the Browns in terms of style of play, running the football, and controlling the clock when they need to, especially late in the game with Chubb and Hunt. They can get a lot of the players back that were out tonight. They can get Stefanski back and get closer to full strength. I think that will certainly help. We'll see about Jack Conklin's status moving forward with his hamstring injury tonight. But Wendi, I also think you bring up a very good point in the sense that normally headed into a divisional matchup at Arrowhead Stadium in the NFL. Arrowhead and is one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL. They go back and forth with Lumen Field, which is the Seahawks stadium, used to be known as CenturyLink Field. They go back and forth for always setting the record for loudest stadium. And what I would compare Kansas City to is it's almost like a college football atmosphere, but at an NFL game. That is normally what a home field advantage is like at Arrowhead, but with the limited capacity, the Browns aren't going to have to worry about that during next week's matchup.
That's right. And that makes the visiting team, just like Pat said, it's not a disadvantage like it has been other years, especially as you get further down in through the rounds.
Yeah, I like that description of a college atmosphere too. I've always felt Kansas City was like that. It was like one big college town, but they're definitely playing pro level ball, and yeah, I'm not surprised as an 8-point favorite. But hopefully that'll motivate Baker to go up against Mahomes. We'd like to win that battle and put up some yardage and stuff. I mean, today he was completely his statistics could not compare to Ben Roethlisberger. And Roethlisberger 500 yards passing and all that, and set a record for the most completions in the game. Baker had an average game at first, by the numbers, even though looking at the field, he looked like the superior quarterback tonight. And I'm very happy for Baker after the, pro Baker, anti Baker all year long and 3 years long. And I'm very happy for him. I think that he'll carry that over into next week. And I expect him to come out battling again next week. I fully expect a very close game. If I was a betting man, I'd take the points. Even if we don't win, I would definitely take the points in the Browns.
Absolutely. We'll see what happens next weekend at Arrowhead Stadium. But the Browns winners tonight over the Pittsburgh Steelers, 48-37, the final. Wendi and Pat, I appreciate both of your time tonight and for staying up late here on the Browns Nation station. It's always a pleasure talking with both of you.
Thank you. This was fun. It's always fun after a win.
100%.
More fun.
For Pat Opperman and Wendi Oliveros, I'm Mark Bergin. Thank you for listening to the Browns Nation station. Please go leave us a 5-star review. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your shows. We will see you next week after Chiefs and Browns. Take care. Enjoy the victory. And so long, everyone.